The first man, Adam. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 45 to 49, we learn some very important insights concerning the creation of man. We also see the contrast between the first Adam and the last Adam, which further helps see God's design and internal plan for us. In verse 45, Paul states, "The first man, Adam, became a living soul." Paul cross-referenced this position of Scripture back to Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, which states, "And the Lord formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." This verse shows us the two main substances God used in the original creation of man, dust from the earth and the breath of God. The first substance God used in creating man was the dust or dirt from the earth. This shows us that God used the very same substance that He created the earth, plants, trees, and animals. God took the dirt from the ground, added water, so to speak, and formed man into a human creature. In Genesis chapter 1 verse 27, it says that God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he them. Image in the Hebrew language is tselem, which means model, shape, form, fashion, resemblance, figure, likeness. God took the clay-like substance from the earth and he formed it and fashioned it into the very shape and image of himself. He gave it all the bodily parts that he himself has, example, arms, head, legs, hands, eyes, ears, nose, etc. From this verse, we know that the human creature is in the exact shape and image of his divine creator. All other creatures, such as the animals, are not in the same image as God. God, using the dirt of the ground, further shows us that He created the body of man from a temporary substance. Dirt is earthly and not heavenly. It is not compatible with the heavenly and the eternal. It shows us that God never intended the body to be an internal part of man. Rather, it was created only to be a temporal earthen vessel for man to live in during his lifetime on earth. This also explains why the body has such an affinity with the creation more than the creator. The creation is all made out of the temporary earthly substance of earth. This causes all creation to have an affinity with itself, more so than an affinity with God, who is spirit and eternal. Man, a living soul. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 45 and Genesis chapter 2 verse 7 can conclude that man in essence is a living soul. God breathed into the nostril of the clay image he formed from the dust of the ground the breath of life. The breath of life signifies a substance from God that is different than the dust he used for the body. This breath of life was made up of an eternal substance. It shows us that the soul of man is invisible and eternal. Man has been created by God as an eternal being. Within the soul comes the very soulish attributes that God has. The soul is comprised of three main elements: the mind or intellect, the will, and the emotions. Also within the soul of man is the personality of the person. The soul is also known as the self. In essence, man is an eternal soul being that has a unique personality of his own and that is able to think, make decisions, and have feelings even in like manner or the same way God does. The last Adam. The last Adam is Jesus Christ. He is the one sent by God that would make man into the person that God so desired. When we see Christ, we see that he was also in the image of God, but in a totally different and glorious stature than man. In Colossians chapter 1 verse 15, it says, "Who is the image of the invisible God." Also in Hebrews chapter 1 verse 3, it says, "Who being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person." Both are speaking of Christ being in the very image of God. From both of these verses and others, we know that the image of God is referring to the divine attributes of God. These attributes are love, joy, peace, righteousness, holiness, wisdom, power, grace, mercy, and all the divine attributes, stature, and nature of God Himself. In Colossians chapter 1 verse 19, it says, "For it pleased the Father that in Him all the fullness should dwell." And in chapter 2, verse 9 of Colossians, it says, "For in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily." After Christ completed his mission of redemption on earth, he was resurrected by the Father to the right hand of the throne of God. God took his spirit within Christ and made him the life-giving spirit and the incorruptible seed that he would birth into man upon acceptance of Christ. The spirit of life is the spirit of Christ, the incorruptible seed and the divine nature of God put in us at the new birth. This is Christ in us, our hope of glory that makes us complete, justified, saved, righteous, made alive to God, and in the image of God, with all the divine attributes of God. And as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we shall bear the image of the last Adam. To God be the glory. God bless you.